You thought money would save you? Call a tow truck.
I should have known something was wrong when Amy started locking the bathroom door. We'd been married 8 years, and in all that time, she'd never once closed the door while brushing her teeth. But for the past 3 months, I'd hear that little click every morning, followed by hushed phone conversations I couldn't quite make out through the wood. I'm Oliver Knox, 38 years old, owner of Knox Auto Body on the east side of town. It's not glamorous work. Oil stains don't wash out easy, and most days I smell like brake fluid and regret. But it's mine. Built it from nothing after my old man drank himself to death and left me with nothing but a toolbox and a mortgage. Amy worked HR at Dalton Manufacturing, one of those mid-sized companies that thinks pizza parties count as benefits. She was good at her job, the kind of person who could smile while handing you a termination notice. I used to find that attractive, back when I thought competence and coldness were the same thing. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything went to heck. I was in my basement workshop, rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick, when I heard Amy come home. Her footsteps on the floor above me sounded different, lighter, almost bouncing. She was humming something. Amy never hummed. I wiped my hands on a rag and headed upstairs. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine with a smile that made my stomach drop. It was the kind of smile people wear when they're about to ruin your life and feel good about it. "Oliver," she said, way too cheerful. "We need to talk." Those 4 words. Every man knows those 4 words mean nothing good is coming. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and leaned against the counter. "All right, talk." She took a long sip of wine, like she needed courage. "You know how Steph and Greg have been trying to have a baby?" Steph was Amy's older sister, 35 going on 50, with that tight-lipped smile that screamed, "I'm better than you, and we both know it." Greg was her husband, some finance guy who wore too much cologne and called everyone buddy, like he was doing you a favor by acknowledging your existence. "Yeah," I said slowly. "I remember you mentioning it. Well, they've been having trouble. Steph can't carry a pregnancy to term. It's been really hard on them." Amy's voice had that practiced sympathy tone she used at work. "So we came up with a solution." She said "we" made my blood run cold. "What kind of solution?" Amy set down her wine glass and looked me straight in the eye. "I'm going to be their surrogate. I'm already pregnant." The carburetor I'd been working on suddenly made more sense than my wife. "You're what?" "Pregnant. 8 weeks. It's Greg's baby, obviously, but I'm carrying it for Steph. It's a gift, Oliver. A beautiful gift for my sister." I felt like I'd been hit with a tire iron. "When exactly were you planning to tell me you were going to have another man's baby?" "Blen, I'm telling you now." She picked up her wine again, casual as discussing the weather. "We did it during that family vacation last month, remember? The one to the lake house?" I remembered. She'd insisted on going without me, said it was sisters only time. I'd spent that week rotating tires and trying not to think about how my marriage had started feeling like a car with a slow leak. You don't notice it until you're already stranded on the side of the road. "Let me get this straight," I said, my voice coming out way calmer than I felt. "You went on vacation, slept with your sister's husband, got pregnant, and you're telling me this is somehow a good thing? It's not like that. It was clinical. Well, mostly clinical. The point is, I'm helping my sister have the family she's always wanted." "Mostly clinical?" I set my beer down hard enough that foam spilled over the top. "What the heck does mostly clinical mean, Amy?" She had the decency to look away. "It means we did what we needed to do. Several times, actually. Greg said it would increase the chances of conception." "Greg said." I laughed, but it came out wrong like broken glass. "I bet he did. And Steph knows about this?" "Of course she knows. It was her idea." That's when I knew I wasn't dealing with an affair. I was dealing with something worse. Some twisted family plan where I was the only one who didn't get a vote. "Get out," I said. Amy blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Get out of my house." "Oliver, you're being unreasonable." "Being unreasonable?" My voice was rising now. 8 years of being the guy who fixed things and kept quiet finally cracking open. "You cheated on me with your brother-in-law. You're pregnant with his kid, and I'm the unreasonable one?" "It's not cheating if it's for family," Amy said, and she actually believed it. I could see it in her eyes. You got 15 minutes to pack a bag and get out. After that, I start throwing your stuff on the lawn. You can't kick me out of my own house. Watch me. This house is in my name. The mortgage I've been paying while you spent your salary on wine and yoga classes. 15 minutes, Amy. Search at me like I'd grown a second head. In 8 years, I'd never raised my voice to her. Never put my foot down. I was always the reasonable one, the guy who fixed things and didn't make waves. That guy was dead now. Amy grabbed her phone and stormed upstairs. I could hear her slamming drawers, making calls, her voice shrill and indignant. I didn't care. I went back to my workshop and tried to focus on the carburetor, but my hands were shaking too bad. 12 minutes later, I heard a car pull up outside. Then another. Then shouting. I headed back upstairs to find Greg standing in my living room like he owned the place, with Amy behind him looking triumphant. Greg was drunk. I could smell the whiskey from across the room. "What the heck do you think you're doing, buddy?" Greg jabbed a finger at me. "You can't kick my wife out." "Your wife?" I looked at Amy. "That was fast." "She's carrying my child," Greg said, puffing up like he was some kind of hero. "That makes her my responsibility." "Your responsibility," I nodded slowly. "Tell me, Greg, when you were being responsible with my wife, did you use protection? Or was that part of Steph's master plan too?" Greg's face went red. "You don't talk about Steph. She's been through heck trying to have a baby, and Amy stepped up to help. That's what family does. Doesn't sleep with each other's spouses, Greg. That's actually the opposite of what family does. Last, it wasn't like that. Then what was it like?" I took a step closer. Greg was bigger than me, but he was soft. The kind of guy who paid for a gym membership and never went. "Explain to me how you sleeping with my wife multiple times, her words, not mine, was somehow not cheating." Greg looked at Amy, who suddenly found the floor very interesting. "I thought so," I said. "You got 10 seconds to get out of my house before I redecorate with your teeth." "You threatening me, buddy?" "I'm promising you. 10, 9, 8. Greg left, but not before grabbing Amy's suitcase and shooting me a look that said, "This wasn't over." Amy followed him without a word, and I watched through the window as they drove off in his BMW. I stood in my empty living room, surrounded by 8 years of marriage that had just gone up in smoke, and I started laughing. Couldn't help it. The whole thing was so absurd it looped back around to funny. My phone buzzed. A text from Nikki, my lead mechanic at the shop. "Dude, you okay? Val just called me with some wild story about Amy." Val. Amy's best friend, who worked at the salon downtown and had never met a secret she didn't immediately broadcast to the entire town. I texted back, "It's all true. Every word." Nikki didn't bother with hello. "Are you telling me Amy actually got pregnant by Greg? Like Steph's Greg? Mr. I drive a BMW and my cologne costs more than your car payment, Greg?" "That's the one." "Holy heck, Oliver, what are you going to do?" I looked around my house, at the life I'd built that had just been torn apart by people who thought they were entitled to whatever they wanted. "I don't know yet," I said, "but it's going to be memorable." By Wednesday morning, the whole town knew. That's the thing about small towns. News travels faster than a souped-up Mustang on an empty highway. Val had done her job well. By the time I opened the shop at 7, I had 3 missed calls from people I hadn't talked to in years, and a Facebook friend request from someone claiming to be a reporter for the local paper. Nikki was already there, leaning against the garage door with 2 cups of coffee and a grin that said she was enjoying this way too much. "Morning, celebrity," she said, handing me a cup. "How's it feel to be the most talked-about guy in town?" Nikki was 29, built like she could bench press a transmission, and had a mouth that got her in trouble at least twice a week. She'd been working for me for 3 years, ever since she'd walked in and told me my previous mechanic was an idiot who didn't know a timing belt from a fan belt. She'd been right. "I've had better mornings," I said, unlocking the bay doors. "I bet. So what's the plan? You filing for divorce?" "Eventually. Right now I'm just trying to process the fact that my wife thought sleeping with her brother-in-law was a good idea. For what it's worth, I always thought Amy was a snake." Nikki followed me inside. "Too perfect, you know? Like those people who smile while they're stabbing you in the back." Wish you'd mentioned that 8 years ago. Would you have listened? Probably not. Back then, I'd been 30 and stupid, and Amy had been beautiful and interested. That was enough. The first customer of the day was Mrs. Henderson, picking up her Buick. She was 70-something and had the kind of sweet grandma face that hit a mind like a steel trap. "Oliver," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "I heard about Amy. That poor girl must be so confused." "Confused isn't the word I'd use, Mrs. Henderson. Well, you know how women get. Sometimes we make decisions that don't make sense to men. But there's always a reason." She patted my hand. "I'm sure you two will work it out." I didn't have the heart to tell her there was no working this out. Mrs. Henderson had been married to her husband for 50 years before he passed. In her world, marriage was sacred, and divorce was failure. In my world, marriage had just become a bad joke with a 9-month punchline. The rest of the morning was a parade of customers who suddenly needed oil changes and tune-ups, all of them fishing for details. I kept my mouth shut and focused on work. Let them gossip. I had bigger problems. Around noon, my phone rang. Unknown number. "Knox Auto Body," I answered. "Mr. Knox? This is Patricia Winters from Dalton Manufacturing. I'm Amy's supervisor." I stepped outside, away from the noise of the shop. "What can I do for you, Ms. Winters?" "I'm calling because Amy hasn't shown up for work today, and she's not answering her phone. Given the circumstances, I wanted to check if everything was all right." The circumstances, that was one way to put it. "Amy doesn't live here anymore," I said. "You might try calling Greg Morrison. I believe she's staying with him." There was a long pause. "Greg Morrison? As in Stephanie Morrison's husband?" "That's the one." Another pause, longer this time. "I see. Thank you for the information, Miss Knox." She and I had the distinct feeling I'd just lit a fuse on something. Patricia Winters had a reputation for running a tight ship. If Amy was shacking up with Greg and missing work, that wasn't going to go over well. Good. I went back inside to find Nikki talking to a guy I didn't recognize. He was wearing a suit that cost more than I made in a month and had that look that said he thought he was the smartest person in the room. "Oliver," Nikki said, her voice tight. "This is Mr. Morrison. He wants to talk to you." Not Greg. This was an older guy, maybe 60, with Greg's same smug expression. "Richard Morrison," the man said, not offering to shake hands. "I'm Greg's father." "Congratulations," I said. "What can I do for you?" "You can stop harassing my son and daughter-in-law." "Daughter-in-law? That's interesting, considering my wife and I are still legally married." Richard's face went red. "That's a technicality. Greg and Amy are building a family together. The decent thing would be to step aside and let them be happy." I looked at Nikki, who was staring at Richard like he'd just announced the earth was flat. "Let me make sure I understand," I said slowly. "Your son slept with my wife, got her pregnant. And you think I should just, what, give them my blessing? I think you should recognize that sometimes these things happen for a reason. Stephanie can't have children. Amy was generous enough to help. If feelings develop during that process, well, that's natural." "Natural," I nodded. "You know what else is natural? Me telling you to get the heck out of my shop before I forget I'm a professional. There's no need for hostility. You came into my place of business to tell me I should be happy my wife cheated on me. That's pretty hostile, Mr. Morrison." Richard straightened his tie. "I came here to warn you. The Morrisons are a prominent family in this town. We have lawyers, connections, resources. If you try to make trouble for Greg and Amy, you'll regret it." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. A smart man would take the hint." He left before I could respond, climbing into a Mercedes that probably cost more than my house. Nikki whistled low. "That family is something else." "Yeah," I said. "They really are. But here's the thing about people who think money and connections make them untouchable. They forget that the guy who fixes their cars knows where all the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking." I pulled out my phone and made a call. "Harlan," I said when he picked up. "It's Oliver Knox. You still hang out at the Rusty Anchor?" Detectives Harlan Briggs was semi-retired, spending most of his time drinking away his pension and complaining about the state of modern policing. But he still had connections, and more importantly, He owed me a favor after I'd fixed his daughter's car for free last Christmas. Every night, Harlan said. Why? I need some information, off the record. Russo, Regas, your wife? Rempel travels fast. Sentencing. Val came into the bar last night and gave us all the details. Twice. What do you need? Unrestricted. Everything you can find on Greg Morrison and his family. Business dealings, legal troubles, anything that might be interesting. Harlan was quiet for a moment. You planning something, Oliver? Sluggish. I'm planning to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of people they're dealing with. Reclarm. That's not an answer. Got right now. Empau sighed. I'll see what I can dig up. But Oliver, be careful. The Morrisons play dirty. Shameful. So do I said. I just haven't had a reason to show it yet. Misled drink. The Rusty Anchor was the kind of bar where everyone knew your name and your business, whether you wanted them to or not. It sat on the edge of town, a squat building with a neon sign that had been broken since before I was born. The R in Rusty hadn't lit up in 15 years, so locals just called it the Rusty Anchor Sessions. I walked in Thursday night to find the place packed. Apparently, being the center of a small-town scandal was good for business. Harlan was at his usual spot at the end of the bar, nursing a whiskey and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. I slid onto the stool next to him. Buy you a drink? I asked. You're buying anyway, Harlan said. I got your information. Shameful inklist. The bartender, a woman named Sheila who'd been pouring drinks since the 80s, set a beer in front of me without being asked. On the house, she said. Anyone who got screwed over by the Morrisons drinks free tonight. That's a long list, I said. Tell me about it. Sheila moved down the bar to help another customer, and I turned to Harlan. So, what'd you find? Slashing Harlan, pulled out a small notebook, the kind cops used before everything went digital. Greg Morrison, 37 years old, works for Morrison Financial, which is owned by his father, Richard. On paper, he's a financial advisor. In reality, he's a glorified trust fund kid who shows up to the office 3 times a week. Missouri. Not surprising. Gets better. 3 years ago, there was a complaint filed against him by a client. Woman named Jennifer Hastings. Said Greg had been inappropriate during their meetings. Made advances. Tried to kiss her. I set down my beer. What happened? Right. Morrison made it go away. Paid her off. Made her sign an NDA. The complaint was buried so deep, I had to call in 2 favors just to find out it existed. Any other complaints? Flight. Not officially, but I talked to some people and Greg's got a reputation. Likes to chase married women, apparently. Gets off on the thrill of it. Nationality. My hands tightened around the beer bottle. And Amy? Your wife's got her own issues. According to my source at Dalton Manufacturing, she's been on thin ice for months. Complaints about favoritism. Inappropriate relationships with employees. Nothing concrete enough to fire her, but enough that HR, ironic given her job, has been watching her. Patricia Winters mentioned circumstances when she called me. Harlan nodded. Winters is looking for a reason to let Amy go. This situation with Greg might be it, especially if it affects the company's reputation. Good. Sentenced. Oliver. Harlan turned to look at me directly. What are you planning? I'm not planning anything illegal, if that's what you're asking. That's not what I'm asking. I took a long drink of my beer. Amy and Greg think they can do whatever they want because they've got family and money backing them up. I'm going to show them they're wrong. By doing what? By making sure everyone knows exactly what they did. No lies, no exaggeration, just the truth, spread far and wide until there's nowhere left for them to hide. Flushing Harlan studied me for a long moment. You know that won't bring her back. I don't want her back. I want justice. Juffled. Justice and revenge aren't the same thing. Assaulting. Tonight they are. Firefox. Before Harlan could respond, the door to the bar opened and Greg walked in with 2 of his buddies. They were loud, already drunk, and heading straight for the bar. The entire place went quiet. Greg saw me and grinned, the kind of grin that said he thought this was funny. Well, well, if it isn't the ex-husband. Shields. Not ex yet, I said, still legally married, which makes what you did adultery. Adultery, Greg laughed. That's a big word for a grease monkey. You learned that in mechanic school? Relinquies laughed. I didn't move. You know what I learned in mechanic school? I said. That when something's broken, you either fix it or you throw it away. I'm done trying to fix broken things. You calling Amy broken? I'm calling you a homewrecker who hides behind his daddy's money. Greg's smile disappeared. He took a step toward me, but Harlan stood up, and suddenly Greg remembered that starting a fight with a cop, even a retired one, was a bad idea. You need to leave, Harlan said. Now. Shells, this is a public place, and I'm telling you to leave. You want to argue? We can do it down at the station. Greg looked around the bar, at all the faces staring at him with varying degrees of disgust, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of valor. This isn't over, he said to me. You're right, I said. It's not. Glenn and his buddies left, and the bar slowly came back to life. Sheila poured me another beer. That was satisfying to watch, she said. It was just the opening act, I told her. Nikki showed up an hour later with Val in tow. Val was Amy's former best friend, emphasis on former. She'd apparently decided that loyalty to juicy gossip outweighed loyalty to Amy. Oliver! Val slid onto the stool next to me, already 3 drinks in by the look of her. I have been dying to talk to you. Val, I said cautiously. Val was dangerous when she was sober. Drunk Val was like a tornado with a phone. I just want you to know that I had no idea what Amy was planning. None. If I'd known, I would have told you immediately. A lie. Val had probably known for months. Sure, I said. I mean it. Amy swore me to secrecy, said it was for Steph's sake. But I told her it was wrong. I said, Amy, you can't just sleep with your brother-in-law and expect Oliver to be okay with it. But she didn't listen. Nikki caught my eye and mouthed, let her talk. What else did Amy say? I asked. Val leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that everyone in the bar could hear. She said Greg was better than you. In bed, I mean. Said he made her feel alive again. There it was, the knife twisted. That so? I said, my voice flat. I told her she was being ridiculous. You're a catch, Oliver. Any woman would be lucky to have you. But Amy, she's always been obsessed with status, you know? And Greg, he's got money and that fancy car and... Val, I interrupted, I need you to do me a favor. Her eyes lit up. Val loved favors, especially ones that involve gossip. Anything. I need you to tell everyone exactly what Amy told you. Every detail. Don't leave anything out. Really? Really. Amy wants to be with Greg? Fine. But everyone should know exactly what kind of person she is first. Val grinned. I can do that. And she did. For the next 2 hours, Val held court at the Rusty Anchor, telling anyone who would listen about Amy's affair, about how she'd planned it during the family vacation, about how she'd bragged to Val about Greg's money and status. By the time last call came around, Amy's reputation was in shreds. Nikki drove me home. I'd had one too many beers to trust myself behind the wheel. You know this is just the beginning, right? She said as we pulled up to my house. I know. Greg's not going to take this lying down. Neither is his family. Good, I said. I'm counting on it. I went inside to my empty house and sat in the dark, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 3 days. My marriage was over. My wife was pregnant with another man's child, and I was about to start a war with one of the most powerful families in town. But here's the thing about war. Sometimes you don't start it. Sometimes it starts itself, and all you can do is decide whether you're going to fight back or let yourself get crushed. I'd spent 8 years being the guy who didn't make waves, who fixed things quietly and didn't complain. That guy was gone. The annual Harvest Festival was a big deal in our town. Every October, they shut down Main Street, set up carnival rides and food trucks, and everyone pretended we were living in some Norman Rockwell painting instead of a dying industrial town where half the factories had closed and the other half were hanging on by a thread. I hadn't planned on going. Festivals weren't really my thing, and I figured showing my face in public would just invite more gossip and pitying looks. But Nikki had other ideas. You're going, she said Saturday morning, standing in my kitchen with her arms crossed. You're going to walk down Main Street with your head up. You're going to eat some overpriced funnel cake. And you're going to show this town that you're not hiding. I'm resisted. I'm not hiding. I'm working. It's Saturday. The shop is closed. You're going. Nikki. Oliver, just a little. If you don't go, everyone's going to think you're ashamed. That you did something wrong. You didn't. Amy did. Greg did. So you're going to that festival, and you're going to remind everyone who the victim is here. She had a point. So that's how I ended up walking down Main Street at 2 in the afternoon, surrounded by families and kids and the smell of fried everything. Nikki walked beside me, pointing out people and providing running commentary. That's the Hendersons. They're on your side. That's the Pratts. They're Switzerland. Won't pick a side. That's... Oh, heck. All her gaze and saw Steph standing by the apple cider booth, looking like she'd swallowed something sour. She was alone, which was unusual. Steph and Greg were usually attached at the hip at these things. Should we? Nikki started. Yeah, I said. We should. We walked over. Steph saw us coming, and her face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Anger, embarrassment, something that might have been guilt. Oliver, she said stiffly. Steph. An awkward silence stretched between us. Finally, Steph said, I suppose you hate me. I don't hate you. I don't understand you. But I don't hate you. It was supposed to help. Amy was supposed to be our surrogate, give us the baby we couldn't have. It wasn't supposed to... She trailed off, looking away. Turn into an affair? I finished. Greg said it was just biological, that it didn't mean anything. And you believed him? Steph's laugh was bitter. I wanted to believe him. There's a difference. Where is Greg? Nikki asked. With Amy. They're at the house, planning their future together. Steph's voice cracked. He asked me for a divorce this morning. Said he and Amy are in love, that the baby brought them together. He actually used the word destiny. I felt something unexpected. Pity. Steph had been part of this mess, but she was also a victim of it. Greg had used her desire for a child to justify sleeping with her sister. And now he was throwing her away like yesterday's garbage. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. Steph looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, too, for all of it. I thought if we just planned it right, if we made it clinical and logical, it would work. But Greg and Amy, she wiped her eyes. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows what they did. Already done, Nikki said cheerfully. Val's been spreading the word all week. Good. Steph straightened her shoulders. Greg thinks his father's money will protect him. But Richard Morrison doesn't control everything in this town. Slamming. What are you planning? I asked. I'm planning to take Greg for everything he's worth. The house, the cars, his trust fund, all of it. And I'm going to make sure Amy doesn't see a dime. Was a commotion near the main stage. People were shouting, and I heard someone yell, Fight! We pushed through the crowd to find Greg and two of his buddies facing off against a group of guys from the factory. One of them was Jake Patterson, a welder I'd gone to high school with. Say that again, Jake was saying, his fists clenched. I said your wife's hot, Greg said, grinning. Maybe when I'm done with Amy, I'll give her a call. Jake swung. Greg ducked, barely, and suddenly everyone was moving. Greg's buddies jumped in, the factory guys surged forward, and the whole thing turned into a brawl right there in the middle of the festival. I should have stayed out of it. Should have let them handle their own problems. But then I saw Greg pull out his phone, probably to call his daddy, and something in me snapped. I walked over and plucked the phone out of his hand. Hey! Greg spun around, saw me, and his face went red. Give that back! No, I said simply. Oliver, I'm warning you. You're warning me? That's funny, Greg. You sleep with my wife, get her pregnant, and now you're warning me? The brawl had stopped. Everyone was watching us now. Greg tried to grab his phone. I held it out of reach. You want this? I said. Go get it. I threw the phone as hard as I could. It sailed over the crowd, over the food trucks, and landed somewhere in the direction of the parking lot. There was a distant crack as it hit pavement. Greg's face went purple. You son of a... He lunged at me. I sidestepped, and Greg's momentum carried him straight into a table full of pumpkins. They exploded everywhere, orange guts covering Greg's expensive jacket. Oops, I said. Greg scrambled to his feet, covered in pumpkin, and charged at me again. This time I didn't move. I let him get close, then grabbed his arm and twisted, using his own weight against him. It was a move I'd learned in high school wrestling, back before I dropped out to take care of my dying father. Greg went down hard. Stay down, I said. He didn't. Greg got up, breathing hard, and pulled out his car keys. You're dead, Knox. You hear me? Dead. He ran toward the parking lot. I followed, with Nikki and half the festival behind me. Greg made it to his BMW, fumbling with the keys. I caught up just as he got the door open. Greg, I said, don't do this. Get away from me, and separated the engine and peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing. I watched him go, then turned to find Nikki holding up her phone. Got the whole thing on video, she said, grinning, including the part where he threatened to end you. Send it to Val, I said. Already done. The crowd dispersed slowly, everyone talking at once. I found Steph standing by her car looking shell-shocked. That was, she started. Stupid, I suggested. I was going to say satisfying, but stupid works too. She got in her car and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with Nikki and a growing sense that I just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. So what now? Nikki asked. Now, I said, we wait for Greg to make his next move. We didn't have to wait long. Monday morning, I got a call from Patricia Winters. Mr. Knox, this is Patricia from Dalton Manufacturing. I wanted to inform you that Amy's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. I sat up straighter in my office chair. Can I ask why? I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but let's just say that certain information came to light regarding her conduct, both personal and professional. We felt it was best to part ways. I see. I also wanted to let you know that we'll be cooperating fully with your divorce proceedings, should you need any documentation or testimony regarding her behavior. Thank you, Ms. Winters. After she hung up, I sat there for a moment, processing. Amy had lost her job. That meant she'd lost her income, her health insurance, and probably her sense of security. She'd be completely dependent on Greg now. My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Oliver Knox, I answered. Mr. Knox, this is David Chen from Morrison Financial. I'm calling to inform you that we're filing a restraining order against you on behalf of Greg Morrison. A restraining order? Mr. Morrison claims you assaulted you. Mr. Morrison, I was a check that there's very label to inform you anyways. Morrison claims you assaulted him at the Harvest Festival and destroyed his personal property. We have witnesses who will testify to your aggressive behavior. I almost laughed. You mean the witnesses who saw Greg threaten to end me? The ones who watched him charge at me first? Those witnesses? Mr. Morrison is prepared to explainly with you. Mr. Morrison's, that's the thing he made. She said, let's could say. I almost laughed. You mean the witnesses who prepared to press charges for assault and destruction of property. However, he's willing to drop the charges if you agree to certain terms. What terms? You will cease all contact with Mr. Morrison and Ms. Knox. You will not speak about them publicly or on social media. And you will agree to an uncontested divorce with no alimony or property claims. And if I don't agree, then we'll see you in court. Sheila hung up before I could respond. I called Harlan immediately. They're trying to intimidate you, he said, after I explained the situation. It's a standard rich person move. Threaten legal action. Hope you're too scared or too poor to fight back. I'm not backing down. Because I did some more digging, and you're going to want to hear this. I'm listening. Greg Morrison has been skimming from his father and stealing someone won from his business. I'm listening. Greg Morrison has been skimming from his father's company. Not a lot, just enough to fund his lifestyle without Daddy noticing. But I found bank records, don't ask how, showing regular transfers to an offshore account. If Richard finds out, Greg is finished. How do we make sure Richard finds out? We don't. We let someone else do it. Harlan paused. You know anyone at the IRS? I didn't, But I knew someone who did. Steph. I called her that afternoon and explained what Harlan had found. There was a long silence on the other end. "You're sure?" she finally asked. "Harlan's sure. And Harlan doesn't make mistakes. If I report this to the IRS, Greg will know it came from me. He's already divorcing you. What's he going to do? Divorce you harder?" Steph laughed, sharp and bitter. "Fair point. Send me the information." I did, along with a note. "Burn it all down." Tuesday morning, I got a call from Nikki. "Turn on the news," she said. "Channel 7. I flipped on the TV in the shop office to find a reporter standing outside Morrison Financial. Federal agents raided the office early this morning as part of an ongoing investigation into financial fraud. Richard Morrison, the company's founder, released a statement saying he's cooperating fully with authorities. His son, Greg Morrison, was taken in for questioning. Jaume. Cut to footage of Greg being led out of the building in handcuffs, his face pale and shocked. I called Steph. "Did you?" "I sent everything to the IRS yesterday. They must have moved fast." "Steph, you might have just destroyed your ex-husband's entire family." "Good," she said. "They destroyed mine first." By Wednesday, the story was everywhere. Local news, social media, even the regional papers picked it up. The Morrisons, the town's golden family, were being investigated for tax fraud and embezzlement. Greg was the primary suspect, but Richard was implicated too. Amy called me for the first time in 2 weeks. "Oliver," she said, her voice small. "I need help." "Help?" "Greg's jail. His accounts are frozen. I don't have any money. I lost my job, and I'm pregnant. I have nowhere to go." I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, nothing. "Oliver, please. I made a mistake. I see that now. But I'm still your wife. You can't just abandon me." "Actually, I can. You made your choice when you slept with Greg. Now, you get to live with it." "I'm carrying a baby." "Greg's baby, not mine. Call him." "Oh, wait, you can't. He's in jail." "Oliver." I hung up. That night, I met Nikki and Harlan at the Rusty Anchor. The place was buzzing with news of the Morrison investigation. Val was in her element, holding court and adding new details with every telling. "You did it," Nikki said, raising her beer. "You actually took down the Morrisons." "Steph took them down," I corrected. "I just provided the ammunition." "Either way, it's over. Greg's going to prison, Amy's broke and jobless, and you're free." "It's not over yet," I said. Harlan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Greg's out on bail as of this afternoon, and Amy's still pregnant with his baby. They're going to try something desperate." "Like what?" "Mr. to know. But people like Greg don't go down without a fight." I was right. Thursday night, someone tried to break into my shop. The alarm went off at 2 a.m, and by the time I got there, the police were already on scene. The front window was smashed, and someone had spray-painted "Dead Man" across the garage door. "Any idea who did this?" the officer asked. "I've got a pretty good idea," I said. They pulled security footage from the camera across the street. The video showed a figure in dark clothes and a hood, but the face was visible for just a moment as they looked up. "Greg." "That's enough for an arrest," the officer said, "especially combined with his bail conditions. He's not supposed to be within 500 feet of you." "Then arrest him," I said. They did. Greg was back in jail by Friday morning, this time without bail. Amy showed up at my house Friday night. She looked terrible. Hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. The pregnancy was starting to show, a small bump under her loose shirt. "Oliver," she said when I opened the door. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She sat on the couch, the same couch where we'd watched movies and talked about our future, back when I thought we had one. "Greg's going to prison," she said. "His lawyer says it's a minimum of 5 years, maybe more. And I'm pregnant with his baby." "I'm aware. I can't afford Oliver. I don't have any money, no job, No family support. Steph won't even talk to me. Shocking. I know I hurt you. I know I made mistakes. But I'm asking you, begging you, to help me. For the sake of the baby. Look at her. Really looked at her. And saw a stranger. The woman I'd married was gone, replaced by someone who thought she could cheat and lie and still expect to be rescued. No, I said. No? You made your choices, Amy. Not just no normal it. Last year's that no coming to it. Like giving a few what left and what. I found with no, let no when, the major choices, Amy. You chose Greg over me. You chose to get pregnant with his baby. You chose to blow up our marriage for some twisted family plan. Now you get to live with those choices. But the baby is not my responsibility. It's yours and Greg's. Figure it out. Oliver, please, get out of my house. She started crying, big, dramatic sobs that might have worked on me a month ago. Now they just made me tired. Amy, I'm going to say this once. You need to leave. Now, before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. She left, still crying, and I closed the door behind her. Nikki called me an hour later. Val just told me Amy's staying at the motel on Route 9, the really sketchy one. Good for her. Oliver, she's pregnant and broke. That place is not my problem, I said. She's not my wife anymore. Not in any way that matters. When did you get so cold? When I realized being nice just meant getting used. The divorce papers came through in December, 3 months after Amy's bombshell announcement. I signed them in my office at the shop, with Nikki as my witness. How do you feel? She asked. Lighter, I said. Like I've been carrying around something heavy and finally put it down. That's good, right? Yeah, it is. Settlement was simple. I kept the house and the shop. Amy got nothing. Her lawyer tried to argue for alimony, but given the circumstances of the divorce, the judge wasn't sympathetic. Greg got sentenced to 7 years for tax fraud and embezzlement. Richard Morrison cut him off completely, refusing to pay for his defense or support Amy and the baby. The Morrison empire was crumbling, and Richard was trying to salvage what he could. Amy gave birth to a boy in March. I heard about it through Val, who heard about it from someone at the hospital. Amy was living in a subsidized apartment and working at a grocery store, trying to make ends meet as a single mother. Steph got everything in her divorce, the house, the cars, half of Greg's trust fund before it was seized. She moved to California to start over, sending me a Christmas card that said simply, "Thank you for helping me see the truth." As for me, business at the shop picked up. Turned out being the guy who stood up to the Morrisons was good for my reputation. People respected someone who didn't back down, who fought back when they were wronged. I was working late one Friday in April when Nikki stuck her head into the office. "You've got a visitor," she said. I looked up to find Amy standing in the doorway, holding a baby carrier. She looked better than the last time I'd seen her, healthier, more put together. But there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Oliver," she said, "I wanted you to meet your son." I stood up slowly. "My son?" "Well, technically he's Greg's. But Greg's in prison, and you were my husband when I got pregnant, so legally—" "Stop," I said. "Just stop. Oliver, I know things ended badly between us, but this baby needs a father. And you're a good man. You haven't even heard what I'm asking. I don't need to hear it. The answer is no. That's not my son. He's yours and Greg's. I'm not going to play daddy to another man's child just because you made bad choices." Amy's face hardened. "Fine. I'll remember you said that when he asks about his father someday. You do that. And when he's old enough to understand, you can explain to him why his mother chose to sleep with his uncle and destroy 2 families in the process." She left without another word. Nikki came in after she'd gone. "That was harsh." "It was honest. You think she'll come back?" "No," I said. "I think she finally understands that I'm done being her safety net." I got a call from Harlan. "You're going to want to hear this," he said. "Greg's trying to get his sentence reduced." Part of his deal is testifying against his father in the tax fraud case. Good for him. There's more. Amy's been visiting him in prison. Apparently they're still together. She's waiting for him to get out. Let me guess. She thinks he'll go back to her when he's released? That's the plan. Greg's lawyer is arguing that he's a changed man, that having a child has made him want to turn his life around. I laughed. Greg Morrison, family man. That's rich. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. People like Greg and Amy, they don't change. They just find new ways to justify their behavior. What about you? Harlan asked. You changed, I said. I just stopped pretending to be someone I wasn't. The final piece of the story came in June. I was at the Rusty Anchor with Nikki and some of the guys from the shop when Val burst in, practically vibrating with excitement. You are not going to believe this, she said, sliding into our booth. Try us, Nikki said. Greg Morrison is getting out of prison early. Some kind of deal with the prosecutor. He's being released next month. Good for him, I said, taking a drink of my beer. That's not the interesting part. The interesting part is that Amy's been telling everyone that they're getting married as soon as he's out, that they're going to be a real family. And? I said. Val grinned. And Greg's been telling his cellmate that he's dumping Amy the second he's free. Said she was just something to pass the time, that he's going to move to Florida and start over. Nikki whistled. That's cold. That's karma, I said. You're not going to warn her? Val asked. Why would I? She made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. Val looked disappointed that I wasn't going to provide more drama, but she moved on to another table to spread the news. You really don't care what happens to her? Nikki asked. I care about as much as she cared about me when she was sleeping with Greg, I said, which is to say, not at all. Greg got out of prison in July. I heard he moved to Florida like he'd planned, leaving Amy and the baby behind without a word. Amy tried calling me once after that. I didn't answer. 6 months later, I heard she'd moved back in with her parents in Ohio, taking the baby with her. Her parents had disowned her when the affair came out, but apparently they'd softened when they met their grandson. Steph sent me a text. Heard Amy's gone. How do you feel? Sentenced I texted back. Free. And I was. The shop was thriving. I'd hired 2 new mechanics and was thinking about expanding. I'd started dating someone new, a teacher named Rebecca who didn't know about my past and didn't care when I told her. Life was good. One night, almost a year after Amy's confession, I was closing up the shop when I found an envelope taped to the door. Inside was a letter. Oliver, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I needed to write this. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Not sorry things didn't work out the way I planned. But genuinely sorry for hurting you. You were a good husband. You deserved better than what I did to you. I convinced myself that what Greg and I had was real, that it was destiny or fate or whatever. But it wasn't. It was just 2 selfish people making selfish choices and hurting everyone around them. Greg's gone now. He never cared about me or the baby. He just wanted the thrill of the affair. And when it stopped being thrilling, he moved on. I'm raising our son, my son, alone. My parents are helping, but it's hard. Every day I look at him and see Greg, and I remember what I gave up for a fantasy. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just wanted you to know that you were right, about everything. And I'm sorry I didn't see it until it was too late. Amy. Manslaughter twice, then walked over to the trash can and threw it away. Nikki came out of the office. What was that? Nothing important, I said. You sure? Yeah, I said. I'm sure. We locked up the shop and walked to our cars. The night was clear, stars visible despite the streetlights. You ever regret it? Nikki asked. The way things ended? No, I said. I regret the time I wasted. I regret believing in something that wasn't real. But I don't regret standing up for myself. Good, Nikki said. Because you deserve better than what she gave you. We all do, I said. I drove home to my empty house that didn't feel empty anymore. I made dinner, watched a game on TV, and went to bed early. The next morning I woke up and went to work. The shop was busy, the sun was shining, and life was exactly what I'd made it. Amy had tried to destroy me. She'd betrayed me, humiliated me, and left me for another man. But in the end, she'd done me a favor. She'd shown me who I really was. Not the guy who fixed things and kept quiet, but the guy who stood up and fought back. And that guy was doing just fine. 3 years later, I was standing in my expanded shop. Knox Auto Body now had 6 bays and employed 8 people when I got a call from an unknown number. "Oliver Knox?" a woman's voice said. "Speaking. This is Margaret Chen from the Small Business Association. I'm calling to inform you that you've been nominated for our Entrepreneur of the Year award." I almost dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your business has shown exceptional growth and community impact over the past 3 years. We'd like to honor you at our annual gala next month." I accepted, still in shock. The night of the gala, I wore a suit I'd bought specifically for the occasion. The first suit I'd owned since my wedding. Rebecca came with me, beautiful in a blue dress that matched her eyes. As I stood on stage accepting the award, looking out at the crowd of business owners and community leaders, I saw a familiar face in the back. Steph. After the ceremony, she came up to me. "Congratulations," she said. "You've come a long way." "I have you," I said. Steph had started her own consulting business in California and was apparently doing very well. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "Amy reached out to me last month. She wanted to know if I'd help her get back on her feet." "What did you say?" "I said no, and then I blocked her number." Steph smiled. "Some bridges are meant to stay burned." "Amen to that," I said. That night, driving home with Rebecca asleep in the passenger seat and the award on the back seat, I thought about everything that had happened. Amy had tried to destroy me. She'd taken my marriage, my trust, and my peace of mind. But she hadn't taken my future. I'd built that myself, from the ground up, with my own 2 hands. And it was better than anything I'd had before. The last time I heard about Amy was 5 years after the divorce. Val mentioned in passing that Amy had gotten remarried. Some guy she'd met at the grocery store where she worked. They were living in Ohio with her son, who was now in kindergarten. "You ever think about her?" Val asked. "No," I said honestly. "I don't." And I didn't. Amy was a chapter in my life that had closed. Greg was in Florida, working some dead-end job and probably cheating on whatever woman he'd convinced to take him in. The Morrisons had lost most of their money and influence. And I was here, running a successful business, in a healthy relationship, and finally, at peace. Some people might say I should have forgiven Amy, that holding on to anger was poisonous, that I should have let it go. But I didn't hold on to anger. I just refused to let someone who'd betrayed me back into my life. There's a difference. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean giving someone another chance to hurt you. Sometimes forgiveness just means accepting what happened and moving on. And that's exactly what I did. I moved on. I built a life I was proud of, and I never looked back.